My stepmother pressured my father to sell the house. My late mother left me and divide the money with her children. Now, they're begging me to forgive them after I exposed their betrayal to everyone? This is a temporary account because I don't want anything to affect me again. I never imagined that someday I'd be sharing a story like this, which is why I don't want to use my main account. I'm a woman, 25 years old, and I've always had a complicated relationship with my father, mainly because of how self-centered he is. That pretty much sums things up. But if you want more details, I'll tell you that he always put his needs and desires above everything else, without caring about or even thinking of others. I never understood what my mother saw in him, but they got married and had me. I once asked her about it, and she said he hadn't always been that way, which was hard for me to believe. So we never had that close father-daughter relationship. However, my relationship with my mother was completely different. She was the true definition of a mother. She took me everywhere with her, and we did everything together. My parents came from completely different backgrounds. My father grew up in a dangerous neighborhood, and his parents weren't the best role models, especially his father, who unfortunately died in prison years ago. I never met my paternal grandparents, and my mother explained that it was because they were toxic and untrustworthy people. My mother, on the other hand, came from a well-known family loved by everyone. My parents met in college, and my mother always described their first date as magical and romantic. Again, I found it hard to believe because I almost never saw my father pamper her. Growing up, I learned that my maternal grandparents never wanted my mother to marry my father, but they eventually accepted and supported her decision because they saw she was happy. Unfortunately, my mother suffered multiple miscarriages and a stillbirth before having me, so I don't have any siblings. After my birth, my mother had her tubes tied because she didn't want to go through the pain of trying again. She was just grateful to have at least had me. But my birth was just the beginning of her health problems. Shortly after I was born, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. It was a very dark time, but in the end, happiness returned to our family. My mother managed to beat cancer. Life went on, and we were grateful for this second chance. Everything was going well. She was a hardworking woman and had her own business, despite her family being well off. Don't get me wrong, my father was also hardworking, but he always fell into the unnecessary pressures of society. He felt the need to show off that he had money, even though he didn't. I mean, he earned well, but nothing to brag about. My mother was the one who really brought in the money, but nobody knew except my maternal family. Everyone else thought it was my father who earned so much. Unfortunately, tragedy struck and my mother's cancer returned. This time it was much worse than the first time. She had to stop working and eventually spent more time in the hospital than at home. At that time, I was in college, but luckily not too far from her, so I visited every weekend. I had to make that trip every Friday night and return Monday morning, but every second with my mother was worth it. My father wasn't at the hospital much, but I assumed it was because he spent more time there during the week when I wasn't around. My mother passed away shortly after my 21st birthday, and it was the worst birthday gift I could ever receive. At least I can say the funeral was beautiful because her parents took care of everything, despite being as devastated as I was, or even more, by losing their daughter. Then came the will that my mother had put in order before passing away. It wasn't a sudden death, so she had time to put everything in order. A few months after my mother's death, my father introduced me to my stepmother, Melissa, and her 2 children, Joy and Naden. And it wasn't just an introduction to a new girlfriend. He intended to marry her. Not only that, he justified it by saying that my mother would have wanted him not to be alone. Later, I discovered that Melissa worked at the same company as my father, so it was as suspicious as you can imagine. It didn't make things easier that my relationship with my future step-siblings wasn't the best. Joy and Naden didn't have the same enthusiasm as I did about having siblings, so they wanted me as far away from them as possible. Melissa wasn't any better. She told me to my face from the first moment that she had no plans to be a mother to me, even though I'm an adult, and don't need a new one because she already had her own children to take care of. Anyway, I wasn't at home, so it wasn't like all of that affected me, because I wasn't going to have a close relationship with them anyway. The most I might have to share with them would be a dinner or holiday. Once my mother's inheritance was resolved and we received our part, my father immediately married Melissa and bought her a new house. Then he bought her a new car and has been covering all of Joy and Naden's expenses ever since. They're also adults like me, but they still haven't found their purpose, as he says, and don't work or study. Since my father bought a house with only 3 bedrooms and made it very clear that the 2 additional bedrooms were for his children, I wouldn't be allowed to visit for very long stays. Then there was the house where I grew up, which was in my mother's name, and she left it to me. My father got 50% of what my mother left, while I got the other 50%, which brings us to the present. I'm currently in medical school after completing my bachelor's in health sciences. I'm very happy that my mother left money to cover my tuition in case I didn't get a scholarship or funding. Medical school isn't exactly cheap. One day, while I was in class, I received a text message from my father. It surprised me because we barely talked, and the last time I saw him was more than a year ago. He asked if we could meet for lunch. I was in the middle of class, so I decided not to respond and read it later, but he was impatient and sent me another message, this time a long paragraph. He said he didn't like how distant we were and that he wanted to work on our relationship. After class ended, I told him we could meet. We met on the weekend at one of my favorite restaurants, and I was surprised that he actually knew it was one of my preferred places to eat since he made the reservation. We talked about our lives, and then he asked about medical school. He told me he couldn't wait to brag about his daughter becoming a doctor, which brought a small smile to my face. Let's be clear, this was the first time in a long time that he had a real conversation with me. But then he went further. He began to apologize for everything. He admitted to making many mistakes after Mom's death and said he wanted to make things right. He told me that my stepmother and step-siblings also wanted to improve their relationship with me, which surprised me. My response was that I would think about it. Then he asked if they could come over for dinner the next weekend so we could talk about everything and put the past behind us. Well, I accepted. If that dinner was as good as this lunch, I wouldn't lose anything. Unless, of course, they poisoned the food, but I didn't expect something like that to happen. At worst, I thought I would just be wasting one night of my life. After lunch with my father, I went to my cousin Derek's house. He's my Aunt Meredith's son, and he's like an older brother to me. When I told him about my intention to reconcile with my father and his new family, he was completely opposed. He not only opposed it, he made it very clear. For him, my father's intentions weren't genuine, and partly I thought the same thing. We talked a bit about this, and now I don't know. Do you think I should meet with my father or not? Like I said, at most I'd be wasting one night, and since my father has offered to bring the food, I don't think I'd lose much by meeting with them. Update 1. I didn't receive many comments before the dinner in my previous post, so I had to make a decision on my own, and that was to meet with my father and his family. So going to that night, my father and his new family arrived at my house for dinner. They brought food they had purchased, so I only had to serve it at the table. As I mentioned earlier, my stepmother had this horrible habit of being very indifferent and never willing to listen to another person's opinion or point of view, which always led to us clashing. However, I noticed a change in my step-siblings. Naden, who never offered to help anyone, actually offered to help me set the table. She told me about her plans to go to university next fall, because she had finally discovered what she wanted to do. It was about time, I guess. I was glad to hear that and told her if she needed help, not to hesitate to ask me. While we were having dinner, my father told me he was very proud of me and all my achievements. Yes, my father was still being attentive to me, which was more suspicious. Then my stepmother asked me when I would graduate. I told her I only had 3 months of school left, and then I would start my residency. She asked me where I would be doing my residency and if I was accepted in another state, what would happen to the house. Since starting medical school, I had been living in the house my mom left me, as there was a university nearby, and I was able to return. I remained silent for a moment and realized that I had never really thought about that possibility before. However, Joy told her to stop stressing me out and that I would deal with that after my exams. It felt good that he defended me a little. The dinner went well, and we all agreed that we would work on improving our relationships. However, I found it very strange that my stepmother was so concerned about the house. Yes, it was suspicious. Later the next day, I noticed that my father had posted on Facebook about my upcoming graduation, which made me feel a bit strange. I understand that he's proud of me, but why does he feel the need to express it on his social media? Yes, everything is suspicious with them now. I would think that my father and stepmother want my house, but they've bought one with the money my mother left them. My father also inherited my mother's business because she knew I couldn't take care of it, so she left me more money than my father so that we both would receive 50%. Maybe he's after that money, but I don't know. It's not like I'm going to sign him a check. What do you think? Update 2. Well, now we know what my father wanted and why this sudden change. I'm glad at least I didn't let him back in so easily. That dinner was just that, and we only agreed to try to improve our relationship, which finally won't happen. But let's get to what matters. I was busy preparing notes for my group study session when someone knocked on the door. It was the sheriff from my town. He pulled out a document and told me I had been served. Served? Why? He made me sign that I had received the notification and then left. I began to read the document, and that's when I realized what was going on, and I wasn't happy at all. I was furious with my father. My father had gone to court, and his lawyer had filed an eviction notice against me. He was giving me 30 days to pack my things and leave the house. He was also claiming that the house legitimately belonged to him because his name was on the property deed, which was a complete lie. But somehow he had managed to draft a fake document stating that he was the owner of the house, not my mother. I decided to call him to end this nonsense once and for all, and there returned the old father I knew so well, the one who was cold to me. He was no longer acting like the man who, 2 weeks ago, was asking for reconciliation. It was the real him again, not that sweet gentleman. He told me I needed to grow up and find my own place instead of living off him. Well, I was laughing at him because he has done absolutely nothing for me since Mom passed away. I told him I wasn't going to leave my house, which I emphasized so there would be no doubt, and he said I had to leave his house, emphasizing the his. I could hear my stepmother telling him to tell me that I had to leave right now because they needed to move things in now. It made sense why she was asking so many questions about the house, since they wanted it. Although I still don't understand why they want it, since as far as I knew they already had their own, which I must admit is better than this old house. I asked him why he wanted this house if they already had one, and if he was going to give me his. He said no, that he simply wanted to return to a house with many memories for him, that besides, this was a bigger house and perfect for all of them. And he has a point because despite being an old house, it's also bigger. I repeated to him that it was my house and that I wasn't going to give it to him, but if he had an above-market offer, I would consider it. If not, he could go and ask his new children to get him a bigger house. But then I remembered that they were lazy and had nothing, not even jobs or studies. He started yelling at me because I had no right to insult his children and that I was simply jealous of them. Sure, I was jealous that they were almost the same age as me and had nothing to show for it. It's okay that I inherited the house from my mother and didn't obtain it through my work, but I got into medical school through my own effort, something his new children wouldn't achieve because they've done nothing with their lives. The conversation ended more or less at that point. Now I have 30 days, according to the notification, to leave my house. That is, if tomorrow, Monday, I don't speak with my lawyer first thing in the day. Update 3. It's been exactly a week since I was served the eviction notice, so I'm still within the timelines. Don't worry, my father isn't going to evict me from my own house. Thanks to my Aunt Merid, I was able to contact my mother's lawyer, Kit. Even my aunt accompanied me to the meeting to talk to him, as she was just as furious with my father as I was, perhaps even more. She was part of the family that hated the idea of my mother with him. Kit assured me that the house was legally only my mother's and that she had specifically left it for me. He had documents to prove it, but would need a little more time to find the documents because they were archived. But that I shouldn't worry. After the meeting, we went for coffee with my aunt, and she was even more furious than before. The caffeine wasn't a good idea because I felt like she could break the table in two with her head. She started speaking badly of my father and then accidentally let slip that my father had been having an affair with Melissa before my mother passed away. I asked her to repeat what she had just said. My aunt realized she had revealed something unintentionally. She sighed and confessed. She told me she always knew my father had been cheating on her with Melissa. She revealed that the affair had begun at the time my mother's cancer returned. She wanted to tell my mother, but it wasn't the best news to tell someone who had to go through cancer again, especially at that time when the chances of survival were very slim. She didn't tell me after her death either because she knew how bad I was feeling and didn't want to pour salt on the wound. Also, she had opted to distance me from my father. It's not that I had never thought about it, but I didn't expect my father could do something like that. The most I thought was that they had feelings for each other, and just waited for my mother's death to start having something. Not that it made it better, but at least he wouldn't have been unfaithful to her. But now, with the confirmation, it was very different. Everyone had found it very suspicious and strange that my father married Melissa so quickly after Mom's death, but no one wanted to say anything out loud out of respect for her. I knew I had to expose my father and get revenge for everything he has put me through. While I waited for Kit to send me the documents, I tried to figure out how to get revenge on my father, so I started investigating on my own. The first thing I did was check if the house my father had bought was listed on any sales portal, and it was. There aren't many in this town, and there it was. I talked to my aunt about this, and she said she could find out more. After 2 days, she told me she was able to find out that my father needed to sell it, because not only has he lost my mother's business, but he has taken out a mortgage on his house and now can't pay it. Now it makes sense why they need a house so urgently, to the point of forging documents. Update 4. I know I've been silent since all this drama broke out, but I promise I have something that will make up for how little I've updated during this time. So my father called for a meeting with our lawyers instead of taking me to court. I lied and told him I would move out before the 30-day deadline and promised not to take him to court, that we could resolve this with our lawyers instead. He obviously accepted because he knew he had no chance of winning. The day of the meeting arrived, and my father immediately looked nervous when he saw Kit. My stepmother, on the other hand, had an arrogant smile, probably because she had no idea who Kit was or how he was going to destroy their lives. Yes, he's that kind of Kit. As soon as we sat down, my stepmother wanted me to hand over all the keys to the house and sign a document so I couldn't claim the house in the future, in case I regretted it and wanted to sue them. But Kit pulled out his own documents and easily showed that the house wasn't theirs. He explained to them that they can file a false complaint with the police with forged documents, but that wouldn't hold up if we went to court. They weren't valid papers for a property trial, but they were for a fraud trial. He also said that he didn't specialize in those types of cases, but he knew someone who did. Of course, his name's not Kit, but he could also ruin your life. It was then that their attitude changed to love and peace. Suddenly, they were begging me to forget everything and promising they would do anything to leave this behind. I shook my head and told my father I was going to expose everything he had done to me. Out of pure panic and fear, my father confessed that my stepmother had forced him to do everything. He said that Melissa had threatened to expose their affair while my mother was still alive, and that he didn't want to do that to her. That she practically forced him to marry her because if not, she would tell everyone he had been unfaithful. My stepmother's eyes darkened, and he said it was her fault they had so many debts, that they needed a new house to be able to live. Then he admitted that the only reason he had contacted me was to find out more about the house and see if they could manipulate me into giving it to them so they could sell it and pay their debts, so they wouldn't lose their house. Melissa and my father began to argue in front of everyone. They were facing off against each other, and it seemed as if there was no one around them. At one point, Melissa told him that her real plan was to sell the house, split the money with her children, and leave my father dealing with the debts alone. When they managed to quiet down, Kit intervened to tell them that there was an infidelity clause in my mother's will. If infidelity is proven, all the money my father was supposed to receive should pass to me. I guess my mother suspected something. I can't help but think that she knew and didn't mention anything to avoid ruining her last days with me. Kit also reminded them that there were witnesses to what they had said there, and that it wouldn't be difficult to get more information with a private investigator. My stepmother didn't seem to care because the money was no longer there, and it wasn't her money. But I reminded her that from now on, being married to my father, she would be much poorer, and if she divorced, she wouldn't get anything because she would be divorcing a bankrupt man. Maybe I did wrong, but I mentioned that her children weren't going to help her either because they practically depend on my father. So they would also be ruined because they don't have jobs, they don't have money, and they have no shame in being dependents. This made her angry to the point of getting up with intentions to attack me, but when she tried to throw a punch, or that's what it seemed like because she didn't have much grace in throwing one, my father blocked her before she could hit me. Although he took one, I don't know if it was because my stepmother wanted to give it to him or it was just the movement. Then my father shouted that he was tired of her and that he didn't want to know anything more about her. My stepmother lost her mind and threatened to expose all my father's dirty secrets. It was a productive meeting. No one brought food or snacks, but there is enough information to take them to court. And although that's going to take a long time, I've already started doing some things, always with the approval of the lawyer, who's not named Kit, the one who will handle my case. I've made a very long post on social media telling everything my father did. It's not that it will help much, but at least it helps to show the kind of people he and his wife are. Update 5. I don't think this update will be very long, but there are some things I want to write. Melissa has already filed for divorce from my father. My aunt and I believe she has assumed her losses and wants to cut ties with my father as soon as possible, perhaps before she's too old to find another gullible man like him. My step-siblings have tried to connect with me. They say they really wanted to have a sibling relationship with me but didn't know how to do it. It's curious that they discovered it just when they needed my house. I told them I sincerely hope their mother can find someone rich because, with their intelligence, they're going to suffer a lot in this life. I don't know if they understood the comment, but I didn't wait to find out and simply blocked them. Yes, my father has also been trying to communicate, but my only message is for him to do it through the lawyers. It can be Kit or the other one. I don't care. If he now wants to become a father to his daughter, the lawsuit for the money he has taken will still stand until he returns the last cent. My mother laid it out in her will, and I want to honor her memory. It doesn't matter if my father has money to pay or not. I think another update might come soon, as my father doesn't have much money to pay lawyers. He has a new job after resigning from his old one and taking over my mother's business. It's not the same place where he met Melissa. I only know that. Melissa, at least, is still working. Update 6. I love bringing you positive news, and even more so when they're positive news for me. My father has agreed to return the money by signing a contract where 25% of his salary will be deducted until he pays the debt and its interest. Now I can say it. Kit confessed to me that it would be very difficult to prove infidelity after so much time, so taking him to court would have been a bad idea for me since it wasn't an infidelity that was happening at this moment. I couldn't mention it before in case my father read this, but now, with a contract in which he agrees to pay, he has no escape. My father will take some time to return all the money, but it's not like I need it immediately. His divorce from Melissa has also been finalized, and she has received absolutely nothing. The house was sold, but only to cover part of the debts. Yes, my father will remain in debt for a long time, but they're not just his debts, as Melissa thought. Some were also hers, including part of the mortgage and the credit cards that were in her name. So the only thing those two divided in the divorce were debts. Melissa doesn't have a job now either, thanks to my post. In the end, it did have utility since it caused an investigation at her company. The company where my father worked had a strict policy against romantic relationships at work because they never end well. You don't have to tell me. My father had resigned before his relationship with Melissa became official in quotation marks. Someone must have said they saw them together before. I don't know, but that's what I've heard. I have a bit of pity for Melissa now. No job with debts and with 2 babies in her care. It must be difficult.